This is the Out of Time Film Podcast, where your hosts Tom and John discuss everything from blockbuster films to TV and games like there's no tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the Out of Time Film Podcast. My name is Tom and as always I'm joined with my co-host John, and this week we're talking about The Mandalorian Season 3!
Ooh, wow, it's been a long time since Season 2, hasn't it? Yeah, it was December 2020. That feels ages ago.
This is our 140th episode of the podcast.
Wow.
And we did Mandalorian Chapter 9, which is the first episode of Season 2, and that was our 10th episode of the podcast. So that's...
Oh, wow.
How delightfully weird to look back 2 years ago, that wonderful video with only 60 views, still to this day, doing Mandalorian Chapter 9.
It's such a weird thing to think about because, you know, we've been doing a lot of episodes, we just talked so much, and then we got back into Mandalorian. So it's a weird process. Once you've been like talking for a long time.
It's a full circle moment. We've got quite a couple of full circle moments this year with Oppenheimer coming out, and obviously our first video was on Tenet, Christopher Nolan, but we're here to talk about The Mandalorian, so full spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't seen it. Briefly explain the plot for those who don't know.
Okay. A bounty hunter traveling to Mandalore to redeem his past transgressions with his adopted son Grogu, and being aided on their journey by fellow Mandalorian Bo-Katan Kryze.
Okay, yes, brilliant. So, as you said, it's been a while since we've had any Mandalorian. Obviously, we had Book of Boba Fett, which we did a video on. What did you think of this season?
I don't know what to say, man. Okay, I want to be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly enjoy this one, this entire season. There's been ups and downs on this one. I really liked episode 3 because they brought in new concepts into that, which I was like, this is great. This is you're getting like a new perspective, and it's great. It's just like a great opportunity to use that. And I was like, oh, this is a show about the Mandalorian. But I didn't mind that episode. I thought that was a great, exploration of the scientists that was in the first 2 seasons, and I thought, it was a great way to explore that character, and they used that really well for the 3rd episode. But then again, this is a really strange season to go through because once you've gone through the first 2 seasons, you're just like, wow, this is like really good stories, to traverse through with this Mandalorian character and this creature that is Grogu. It's a really good story. But then something went wrong. The Book of Boba Fett, and I want to say that's a good show, but I thought that was a bit of a downfall into this show because I thought if you could have taken Grogu out, a whole new story would be really interesting. But that's how I felt. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think, I agreed. I've struggled with this season. I didn't dislike it. I had fun with it, and I think that there's value to that. But I would agree with you that this show, it doesn't hit as it used to. And that's a real shame. I would agree that episode 3 I thought was the best, and there are definitely a couple of factors that I think are why, but I think definitely one thing that this show is struggling with is Jon Favreau is the main writer, and basically he's writing every episode this season, and one of the only ones, and maybe even the only one that he didn't write was episode 3, and I think you can tell that he was only a co-writer on that episode because so much of it had so much more subtlety and so much more depth that is there. Of course it's there in the rest of the season. I think there is some really good stuff in there. But also, this season felt like it just blasted past things. You could have easily split these 8 episodes into 16. You could take this story and stretch it over 2 seasons. And I think in many ways, that's what maybe they wanted to do. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a moment, and I'm gonna make a theory, which I think isn't necessarily uncommon, but there are definitely some contextual factors to this season. Pedro Pascal has become such a bigger star after this series, and obviously he made The Last of Us, which obviously he's in that the whole time. He's not wearing a helmet or anything like that, and I think that what's happened here is that he wasn't available to shoot over a bit of time, and so instead of making Mandalorian season 3, they made the Book of Boba Fett and then the Mandalorian season 3, and Pedro Pascal isn't really in either of them. He's doing the voiceover, but he's not on set. Obviously you've got Brendan Wayne, you've got Lateef Crowder, who are also in the suit, and their work has to be acknowledged because they're great. They get starring spots in the credits this season. That's awesome. But obviously, Din doesn't remove his helmet this season. And that's very obvious. That's very noticeable. And you can tell that Pedro isn't there. On the other hand, you've got Rangers of the New Republic, which they announced, but then isn't moving ahead anymore. So you can tell that quite a few of those storylines with Carson Tava and Coruscant and the New Republic, that stuff in episode 3, as we're saying, that stuff feels like it went from that show into this show. And obviously, they also have to deal with the fact that in Book of Boba Fett, they reunited Din and Grogu, which in a lot of ways felt like it was going to be the narrative thrust of this season. My point is, there's a lot going on that it feels like behind the scenes stuff really, unfortunately, affected this season.
Yeah, you can really see that with the messy direction it was going to with this entire season. Because, like, here's what I thought originally before, watching the show, was that it was only going to be focused on Din and the other Mandalorians taking back Mandalore, which they do, but they don't really go into the whole ordeal, which is just only in 2 episodes. Like, they take back a bit of...
Yeah, it was kind of easy.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay. But I wish there was I would say always more emotional weight, but I wish there was more time to go through that because, as always, I always say, like, filler. There was a lot of filler, in my opinion, in this whole show because they were like, oh, can this character do this? And can this character do that? Again, I know they were trying to show, like, hey, we want to show you some character development or character dynamic between the other characters, but no, it just didn't really work with the conflicting tensions that's happening between Moff Gideon. And I completely forgot, like, Moff Gideon when watching halfway the show. I was like, oh yeah, Moff Gideon, he's been gone somewhere and no one knows what it is. And they just completely ignore that, like, halfway through this season. It's like hinted like, oh, he has made trial or something, and he just only appears in the final few episodes. And
yeah, that's a weird thing that all the seasons have done. They don't introduce the villain, like the main villain, until like episode 7, and that works in season 1. It kind of works in season 2, but I think here it suffers because we don't see him for so long.
Yeah, and the other problem I have as well, like, we didn't explore much of Mandalore, but the fact that the villains were already there, I thought, like, the other Mandalorians and Din would arrive on Mandalore early in the season, and then you would explore Mandalore, but there's something wrong with it, and then they'll find out it's the Empire, like, within Mandalore, and it'll be really interesting concept, like, there's something wrong with it. But no, it was just going to all different directions. Like, the episode with Jack Black and Lizzo and Christopher Lloyd.
Oh boy, yeah, I know that episode.
It was such a weird episode to put in. Like,
yeah.
I know it was trying to show, like, the amnesty program with Jack Black's character and trying to get the other Mandalorians to join Bo-Katan, but I just felt like, oh, they're just doing this now. Oh, okay. And you got a lot of cameos, like Rebel fans must be really happy.
I can confirm, yes, we are.
Oh,
seeing Zeb in episode
Zeb,
6, I want to say 5 or 6. That was just really cool. It was. I unfortunately saw that online beforehand, and it was it crushed me. But no, it was a delightful little cameo, and there are some really exciting things coming for the future. You can tell. I think that Dave Filoni especially is excited to get to the Ahsoka stuff. And John, I don't know if you've seen the Ahsoka trailer, but damn. That looks amazing. Like I'm really excited for Ahsoka because I believe that Dave Filoni really wants to tell this story, and there are elements of me that I think maybe they're getting a little bit tired of this Mandalorian story, and they want it to become part of the bigger story with the Empire and the New Republic, and that's why it felt like a lot of this season was very quickly trying to wrap up some of those plot threads from seasons 1 and 2. I think to its credit, this season is more focused than season 2. In the sense that it doesn't dart around as much. For that, I give it a big old thumbs up. But I think you're right. When the episodes aren't necessarily to do with the main kind of story, it feels so off. Like, I didn't dislike the Jack Black and Lizzo episode, but why is it in episode 6? Like, you're right. Why is it there? Maybe if it was early in the season, I'd get it. But no, they place it very strangely when we really should, as you're saying, we should be building up towards Mandalore, and that shouldn't just be a 2-episode thing. You're right. They could have spent a whole season on there, and everything blows by so fast. Things will just happen. And then the next episode would be like, anyway, like episode 5, The Pirates, that ends with all the Mandalorians taking a shop on Navarro, and Grief Karga is like, hey guys, well done. You guys can have this land. You can be part of Navarro. And they're like, great. 2 episodes later, bearing in mind we don't really spend any time on Navarro in Guns for Hire, episode 6. By the time we get to episode 7, they're like, yeah, we're going to Mandalore. And it's like, what was the point of having this thing where they say, hey, we might not have our home, but we have this home? And it's just kind of like, I don't dislike any of it like individually, but I feel like it just, it doesn't really jive well when you look at it in sequence.
Yeah. One of the most annoying things for me was they just completely ignore the scientists from episode 3. Like, I thought they were going to set up that character arc, like this character development, like he's going to fully help the Republic. But no, they just completely ignore that whole story. Like, they just like completely moved on, and then they just don't have any, well, not callbacks for anything to it. I mean, Moff Gideon was talking about the scientist, but there wasn't really anything linking back to it, because that was a great episode. I thought it was going to set up like this character arc for him.
I don't think we're seeing him again, I think that that's it for him. But I do agree that what it felt like was that we're setting up Alaya Kane, right? She's part of the Imperial Amnesty Program. On the surface, she's working with the New Republic and she's getting in their good books. But what we see is that she's actually cold and calculating, and she's plotting these things. To Carson Tava, she makes it so that he won't intervene on Navarro because they need the pirate empire, or whatever it's called, the pirate nation, for the Imperial plans. And we see her talk to Moff Gideon at the end. It felt like they were going to build to this idea that she springs Moff Gideon from prison, because at the end of season 2, he gets arrested. But no, we don't do that. And I don't mind that necessarily, but season 2 ends with Moff Gideon getting captured, and then he's released off screen. And when you think about all the hanging threads from season 2, it's actually really disappointing what they do.
Yeah.
Moff Gideon escapes prison off screen. Din with the Darksaber and the conflict with him and Bo-Katan is resolved so fast in 1 episode after not talking about it for about 5 episodes. Bo-Katan and her covert getting the Imperial light cruiser also off screen. They all leave her. And obviously Din and Grogu separating and Grogu training with Luke, all in a different show. It just feels like they decided to change tune, and they were like, oh no, because obviously after Star Wars Celebration, we know that they're going to make a movie, and that the movie is going to wrap up part of this story, and that's exciting. But it's also like, it feels like they got bored of the other stuff, and they were like, let's build to this, and we'll just wrap this other stuff up. And again, I think that is disappointing.
Yeah, like, I bet everyone was wondering, like, who's gonna help Din escape from the Imperial. But no, he just blasts his way out like John Wick in the last episode. I'm like, oh, okay.
I was convinced that Moff Gideon would take off Din's helmet, and it would be a forceful thing, and Din would have to properly, in shame, go back to the Children of the Watch, and that they would look at him, and he would think, this is it, it's over for me. And then they would say, no, it's not. And they would put away their stupid helmet rule, and he would finally get to understand that he can be a Mandalorian without it, because there are some really good moments, like when the armorer tells Bo-Katan to take her helmet off, and in front of her she's like, Bo-Katan is still a Mandalorian, even though she doesn't have her helmet on. And at the end, when Ragnar Vizsla says the creed, he doesn't mention not removing his helmet, but there isn't that big moment where Din as a character gets to see that, gets to feel that, especially when his whole thing at the beginning of the season is he wants to be redeemed for his transgressions. That's kind of so under the surface. They kind of forget about that. We all thought that the Children of the Watch was a cult. I guess they're not. I guess that was just what Bo-Katan called them, like in a derogatory way, like, oh, they're a cult. But now it's a bit like, all right, but we haven't really had that moment where they feel not like a cult. They haven't really redeemed themselves from that. And, they might decide to do that later on, but it was a bit like, what? Like, so many of these big moments just happen in moments, not like as an overarching story. Like, it's a great moment when Bo-Katan takes the Darksaber and she ignites it and everyone rallies behind her. But that just comes out of nowhere. Din's like, hey guys, actually she can have the Darksaber. Or when Moff Gideon destroys the Darksaber. But there isn't that moment where Bo-Katan realizes, I don't need the Darksaber to rule. Like Din says, he says, I follow you not because of your sword or because of any of this stuff, because of your honor, because you've proven yourself. And there isn't that moment where Bo-Katan as a character gets to accept that for herself. And that just felt like so aggravating and so annoying.
Yeah, man, I completely agree. Like, it just gets so quickly resolved, like, up to the finale. And I just felt like that they weren't taking the time with the writing. Like, Jon Favreau said, I don't know why he said, like, the timeline for Mandalorian. It's so confusing. The years between when Grogu goes with Luke and then he doesn't have a ship. for 2 years. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I think that Jon Favreau meant that we haven't seen them in 2 years, because that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make
There's no way
sense.
that Grogu was with Luke for 2 years. That doesn't
Like
make
2
sense.
years, and I can't even remember the good moments about you know what I mean. Like after you show, you're just like, yes, I just watched a show that is pretty good, and then
Well, we have an email here from Samuel Masson where we can talk about some of the positives, because hey, I want to make it very clear that I do think that there's positives in this season.
Okay,
and so
let's see what Sam says.
All right. Hello there, Tom and John. Hope you're both keeping well. The Mandalorian Season 3 seems to be a mixed bag to many people. I personally enjoyed it. I will admit it was a little disjointed at times. I saw one description say Season 3 felt like a video game meeting a deadline. The episodes that had little contribution to the Mandalore story felt like side quests, and that so long was spent on them that they were almost out of time for the ending, so it felt rushed. I'm not sure how you both feel about that. Yeah, we've already talked about. We agree. There were so many great things about this season, though. Seeing Grief Karga and the progression of Navarro was awesome. The Anzellans in their tiny little workshop. Grogu flying off to get Bo-Katan. I'll never get bored of seeing Coruscant, and it was interesting to see the New Republic's rehabilitation program. Keller and Beck. Need I say more? What a badass. One thing this season did pretty well was help me grow to appreciate Bo-Katan, Axe Woves, and Paz Vizsla. I never really cared for them before, but this season did them justice in my eyes. And of course, the action and music were top notch. Only a couple minor things from me with this season. I've already said about the disjointedness of it, and the ending just seemed to appear out of nowhere. The Darksaber getting destroyed was an odd one for me. So much emphasis was placed on it on the last 2 seasons, and when it was destroyed, that was it. No dismay from Bo or anyone, they just moved on. Another thing I found, maybe it's just me, but is the real Gideon gone? The problem with bad guys making clones is that when they die, how do we know if they're a clone or the original? It probably was the original, but that was my thinking. The last thing I didn't like was the lack of a Back to the Future reference from Christopher Lloyd. What a missed opportunity. I was fine with the cameos overall. Overall, I enjoyed this season. It gave us more Star Wars, which is always a good thing. Thanks for the pod, gentlemen. Take care, Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Yes.
So, what do we think? What are your thoughts on what Sam's saying?
Actually, there are good moments with Bo-Katan. You know, you got to see more of that in the show. Like, you get to see that interacting with the other Mandalorians in some episodes, which I thought that was pretty good. You know, like seeing her, you know, with 2 tribes, you know, coming together, you get to see both worlds. And I thought that was a really interesting piece of story that I thought that was really good.
I agree. In that finale, which I think the finale, you know, there are definitely decisions like with the Darksaber and like with Din not removing his helmet, but I really, really did enjoy the finale. And there's a moment where all the Mandalorians are flying down and Bo-Katan gets out the Darksaber and she points it, and all the Mandalorians, all these tribes, all these people who have always been fighting, who have always been at each other's throats, who have come to a common ground and realized that they shouldn't be focusing on what divides them, they should be focusing on what brings them together. And they come, and it gave me chills. I really, really loved that.
Definitely, yeah, that was a great moment. And yeah, the concept of the clones was just a bit out of place. Again, like, I know it was linking to the scientists, it was linking to everything that was happening during that time. And it was actually interesting. You know, this is going to be leading up to the sequel trilogy, you know, that was all about this clone thing that was briefly explored in Rise of Skywalker with Snoke.
Yes.
And
you mean the pickle jar full of smokes?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I always thought that's where they were going with the cloning stuff, but I guess it is.
I guess,
like, listen, right? Gideon was stupid in this season, like in a good way. In a good way, he was such a goofy, over-the-top villain. When he was like, "My clones are perfect, but there's one thing that would make them even better." The Force! I just thought it was so funny. Like, I just thought he had, like, Giancarlo Esposito is such a great actor. He has such a presence. Yeah. I watched him on stage when I went to Star Wars Celebration. They screened episode 7 for us all on the big screen. It was fantastic. And, you know, like, that right there was just so much fun. It was a blast. He's a blast. And him in his suit, you know, flying about and talking about, I've made the best upgrade to the Dark Trooper suit. It's just like it's brilliant. And yeah, I agree. I love seeing more from the other Mandos, like Paz Vizsla. He's been butting heads with Din since episode 1. It's great to see his development where he eventually sacrifices himself for everybody. And I can just say this season made me happy to say this is the way again. This is the way. When Paz Vizsla looks at Bo-Katan and they're all escaping, and he turns to her and he says, "This is the way." And then he dies such a spectacular death at the hands of the Praetorian Guards. Dude, I thought that was so cool. And I want to talk about. I think this season was really well directed. I think there's some really great action. I think Sam is right about that. The action was just so cool. Like there's this one scene where Din is in front of this laser gate and there's like 3 levels and he has to fight all of the different Imperial super commandos without any weapons, and he's fighting them and he's like and they're shooting him and he's deflecting, and there's one moment where one falls and he tries to grab their gun but it doesn't work, and then R4 on the other side is like opening the gates. That was so cool.
Yeah, it fully reminded me again of John Wick, but in a good way. Like, because I recently watched John Wick 4, and man, that was a great film. But the action in that episode, I thought that was well directed. Like, yeah, what Sam said, I thought that was great. There's a lot of CGI, there's a lot of, action that is involved with CGI, and it can be very off-putting, but it was well directed with the fight sequences, with that laser gate. Yeah, that was great. I loved it. It was just very, I'm just going to say realistic. Yeah. I know this is Star Wars. It's not supposed to be, it's Star Wars, but
I want more realism on my stuff. John, you're sounding like the people in Last Jedi who got angry at things because they didn't make sense, because they didn't make scientific sense. Guys, it's Star Wars. Come on.
Oh God!
John. One day we'll talk about The Last Jedi, and it's gonna be the comments will be on fire.
Oh, the comments will be on fire.
I rewatched the last 30 minutes from that movie the other day, just because I wanted to, and I was absolutely loved it. But no, come back to The Mandalorian. This season, it looks to me like they've got a bigger budget. The show just looks great. I feel like I didn't notice the volume too much this season. Obviously, I did sometimes, but it doesn't look as good as season 1. But there are so many great sequences in the effects. And can I just talk about Pirate Captain Gorian Shard with his face of kale and seaweed? Incredible. That guy, he's my ride or die. I'm there for him. And then he died just like that. I was so upset. I was ready for him to be like a recurring guy. But no, he was so fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that practical effects was just on point. Like,
it really was.
Man, they should do like more practical effects. Like, you can definitely see that in the original trilogy.
There's so many great examples of practical effects all across Star Wars. And I think it's really cool that now we can have CGI effects and practical effects working so well. Like, you've got like Snoke in the same movie as like all the creatures on Canto Bight in Last Jedi. That kind of stuff is just chef's kiss. I think at the end of the day, I take this over a show that really loses me and just isn't interesting anymore. This season isn't the best, but it's still a ton of fun, and I had a great time watching it. Like, I'd rather something like this than something like Killing Eve, for example, which started out really, really, really well, but then to me it got boring and repetitive. And this is like it's definitely a repetitive show, but it's never boring. And I take the dumb action and the weird planets and creatures and Moff Gideon's stupid lines. I'd rather that than boring. Like, to me, this season was better than Book of Boba Fett for that reason alone. I didn't think it was nearly as disappointing as Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as boring either. As much as I do like elements of Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, it's not boring or repetitive. I thought, it was trying to bring in new things, but I thought that was a bit all over the place for me. But the direction for certain episodes were fantastic.
Yeah.
Episode 3 and the action in those episodes were well directed, but I think they just needed to work on certain story elements and character arcs as well, because there's some ones that you can really explore with Bo-Katan and, trying to bring back this whole tribes of Mandalorians and, they're trying to go into Mandalore and you want to see them trying to connect on there. And that would be a really interesting story.
I really hope we have a more focused season 4. And I think we will do, because we've got the movie coming and we've got Ahsoka and we've got Skeleton Crew, and I feel like they know where they want to go.
Yeah.
And let's hope that means good things. And the final thing that I want to talk about is Grogu. Because basically until episode 7, I didn't think Grogu had any reason to be there.
No,
I think this season would have benefited so much more. I think this season would have benefited so much more from Grogu and Din being apart, and Din still missing Grogu and wanting to be back with Grogu. I think that storyline 100% should have been in this season. But we did get some interesting stuff. As Sam mentioned, we finally know who saved Grogu from the Jedi Temple.
Hell yeah.
Of course, it was Gunday, the Go himself. He survived the Clone Wars.
I thought we were just celebrating, like, not Gunday. I thought we were just celebrating
That's going to make no sense. If you've listened before to any of our Star Wars episodes, you'll know exactly where that came from. If you're a new listener, you think I'm mad. Basically, I'm a Gundai is the best Star Wars character ever, and I love it, and John loves it too, don't you, John?
Bro, I was trying to I was getting me excited because I was like,
yes.
This is like, if you didn't know, this is the same person who was Jar Jar Binks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is Ahmed Best, who played Kelleran Beck.
Yeah.
Who is actually the person who saves Grogu, not I'm a Gundai, unfortunately. But yeah, that was just fantastic. The sequence was great. It was brilliantly directed, and seeing him and getting him, like a lot of people saying, "Oh, Ahmed Best is redeemed." No, he's not. He doesn't need redemption. Like, if anything, the fans see redemption for how they treated him. That he was treated so horribly, and to see him get justice almost was incredible. And it's so good to see him. And that character is actually from a Star Wars game show as well. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, called Jedi Temple Challenge, which is on YouTube. And I watched it when it came out. And that's just really fun to see him back. Just, I agree with Sam. That was one of the best moments of the season. And I think in the last two episodes, Grogu has some great stuff. Like, there's that stupid bit with him. He's got the IG-11 mech, and he's saying no, and yes.
No,
and
yes.
I didn't like it, but then they turned that stupid, goofy scene into when Paz Vizsla and Axwoves are fighting, and Grogu separates them, and he says no. And in many ways, Grogu is the best of the Mandalorians. I think in a lot of ways, Grogu is the Mandalorian from the title.
I just can't stop laughing about that. I know it's supposed to be serious. I know it's supposed to be like a serious moment. Completely.
Oh, no. It's still goofy as hell.
I know it's supposed to be goofy, and Grogu's like, no. And that I thought that was a good moment as well. I know the writers are trying to utilize Grogu as a character. You can see the best out of the Mandalorians out of that, and
and I think at the end as well, when he parts the fire, which calls back to season 1, and his like way that he protects his family, and there's that great moment where the Praetorian guards are wailing on him, and Bo-Katan comes in to help Din, and she says, "Go save your kid." That's just really cool, man. And I do think that season 4 has a lot of potential if they focus those moments and they don't kind of become so muddled with it all. But yeah, what are you going to give Mandalorian season 3 out of 10?
It's not terrible or boring or fine, but I thought there was a lot of passion. You can definitely see the passion into this. Like, they wanted to do something with it, but I felt like there was some elements that fell apart. But I want to say I'm going to get a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you're right. There's a lot to be improved upon. And, it wasn't perfect, but it was fun. It was enjoyable. And there are some really good things in there. It's no Andor, but who cares? We've got Andor season 2 coming, and we've got Ahsoka coming. We've got some really exciting stuff coming. That stuff is all going to hopefully be great. But thank you everybody for listening. If you're listening on YouTube and you liked it, you can give us a like and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. Next week, we're doing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is going to be... you can probably tell from my voice that's going to be so amazing. I can't wait. John, I know that you're not emotionally prepared.
No, I saw that clip of...
I haven't watched the clip yet, but I hear it is brutal. Yeah, I can't wait for that. That's going to be absolutely fantastic.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
And you can send us an email at ourstayinfilmpod@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy 3, or ask us any questions, and we'll answer it right here on the podcast next week. And you can follow us on Instagram at ourstayinfilmpod to see our incredible thumbnails from Zain Afzal, and on Twitter for more thoughts from me. Thanks to Jones-Meyer for the excellent theme, and Ronan Phillips for vocals, as always. And I think that is everything.
That is everything. Thank you for listening. Take what you're given.
Give nothing back.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.